What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and I am joined by my good friend, Degenerate Jay. We've had a lot of videos with Jay on this channel in the past. I implore you guys to check him out. We actually did a topic, kind of it complements the one we're about to do on his channel. So I'm going to leave the links for both of his channels, his main channel and his Let's Play channel, in the description below if you guys want to check it out. Obviously, a great guy and somebody, like I said, we do videos all the time on both channels, and we have a fun one that I wanted to get to, whether it was going to be on my own or with somebody else. So Jay, let me welcome you in, and then we'll tackle the mindset of the gaming industry. But thank you for being here.
Hey man, I appreciate you having me. You are the main game here, and I am the downloadable content. I'm added on. I'm gonna make this better, but the main product is here either way.
Well, speaking of that, that was a great. I don't know if you did that on purpose, but that is a perfect lead-in. DLC. That's the topic of today's video, of today's program. We have a former worker. Now, this person has worked in a lot of different Capcom, Xbox, EA, and I want to make it very clear, and even how I retweeted her, how I've seen her respond to other tweets. She doesn't actually mean this in any kind of malicious way. It's her opinion, but it's also how she sees the gaming industry that she is a part of. So I don't look at this as like she's some cocky, like game journalist or developer that like knows everything. She goes on to clarify she doesn't mean every single game. So just, kind of stuff to lay the foundation. So here's what she says. Contrary to popular belief, most DLC isn't content that was maliciously cut from the game to make an extra buck. DLC has its own budget, timelines, green light, staff, etc. It's a whole separate project, and nowadays it's necessary for a AAA/quadruple A game to ever break even. Now, I disagree heavily with the last part, although I have a what if. Like, if that's true, then here's what I think. And then if it's not true, obviously, why I disagree with it. But, Jay, 3 to 6 year span where that was kind of true, where games seemingly had big parts that you would say, well, if you delayed it for 2 months, you could have had that DLC. I feel like we had an era where where I don't believe her, or I guess agree, right? And it's okay to disagree. I don't agree with her for a certain segment of time. I do agree more so now, but even now, I still think it depends on which developer you're talking about. So just that first part, Jay, what do you think?
So I think it depends because I am sure. Here's the thing. I'm sure that the places this person worked, that was probably the case. However, I will also say that there are times when, because I have friends who work in some very major companies right now, and there's a lot of stuff I cannot report on or talk about that they can't talk about either because they would be breaking NDAs and stuff like that. But what I will say is there are a lot of major companies still, I'm talking some of the top players in the gaming industry, that do purposely not include things that are either cut during QA or they are cut even before that. And a good example of that is pre-order bonuses. That is DLC or add-on content, if you don't want to call it DLC, because I've seen people try and make a distinction like that's not true DLC. Well, it is add-on content to the game that, let's look at it, is done at launch. Those pre-order bonuses are done at launch. You look at something like the Joker's Carnival map for Batman Arkham City way back. You look at some of those skins that were done ahead of time, or even look at things like Nuketown Zombies for Black Ops 2. I'm just throwing out some examples off the top of my head of DLC or add-on content that was available at the launch of the game, but only available to people who pre-ordered, right? That is content that was done that could have been in the base game for everybody, but it was kind of pulled aside as a cherry on top, like, hey, listen, you gave us your money ahead of time, here you go, here's something better, because we guaranteed your sale. That's just an example right there of content that is done that doesn't end up making the cut. I cannot tell you, like, I really wish NDAs were not a thing, man, because the amount of things, and you and I can talk about this off recording too, because I do not want to get myself or anyone in trouble, but the amount of things that are touted from some major franchises as like new feature coming now, they were available in QA. Actually, they were being quality assurance tested by people. They were features that people sat down and tried, and they either were waiting to release it with a later content update, or they were essentially going to release it with the main game but ended up having to shelf it because it didn't work right. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't actually realize because nobody can talk about that stuff. The whole industry has been set up in a way now where essentially you have these people, anyone working on these games is not legally able to tell you when this is wrong. And when you leave a company, most of the time that NDA, I believe it lasts, at least at the major companies, it lasts for about a year and a half, sometimes a little less, sometimes actually more, depending on how high up in the company you were. Sometimes if you're high up enough in the company, there's non-compete clauses, like say you're a big boy, up in the big tiers of one of these major companies and you're going to leave, there might be a non-compete clause in your contract where you can't go saying things about the behind the scenes, or you can't go working with another game developer or something for a good 6 months. And so a lot of the times, by the time the information comes out on this was a cut feature, this was going to be in the game, we actually moved this aside for later, and no one cares anymore because the game is old. So I think the problem I have with this statement is I trust this person that they're not being disingenuous with their experiences. But the problem is a lot of the times those experiences come out so far after the fact that by the time they do, whether they're positive or negative, no one cares anymore.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I think as time has moved on, it's definitely gotten better. And even what you said, I mean, that was an era in and of itself as well, right? Best Buy has a pre-order, but that GameStop doesn't. So you have to choose which in a way it's a small DLC. That's what it is, like you said. Which small DLC do you want of the game? Well, that depends on which store you're gonna walk into to place your pre-order. So that is true, and even to this day, I mean, the amount of times the game would come out still, and a couple months after there's something that comes out like a big-ish thing for the game, you could really, I would say you could argue any game that has something big, whether it's like the season pass starts or whatever, something like, or literally a DLC drops, anything like that. If it drops within the first 3 months, I'd argue any one of those games would fall where it's like, well, if you just delayed the game 3 months, then the DLC would come out for it because it would be part of the, what I mean? So I think you could definitely stretch it. And I feel like she's being too nice in a way, but again, it could just be her experience and what she's dealt with. Now, the second part, I have very mixed feelings for because it's definitely, again, well, let's again read it out. I want to talk about if I don't believe it and if I do. So she says, it's all the, and I do, this is definitely true. DLC on budget, timelines, all that stuff. Okay, we know that. Nowadays, it's necessary for AAA and quadruple A to ever break even. I fully disagree. And I disagree just for the fact that I just don't. I guess I don't want to believe it, but I also just don't think most games, because AAA games is like, the Quarry that just came out, that's a AAA game. Does that need DLC to break even? It better not, because it doesn't have DLC. So I mean, to that game's credit, it doesn't have DLC. I mean, it has, I think it has like a skin, like a bathing suit pack or something. I don't even know how much it is. But if they need that DLC to break even, they shouldn't have released the, and that's kind of my thing. So my conflicting thoughts are, I don't believe it for a wide scale of game. I do think there are some, maybe like the Call of Duties need it. It would need like the season passes or like the Battlefields. Games that need to stay around for more than, say, 3 to 5 months probably rely on DLC in some way to stick. Like Dead by Daylight could not survive without DLC, right? That is definitely true for some, but a lot of games that just casually, like TMNT that just came out, Shredder's Revenge, I would call that a AAA. I think I'd lean towards that. That doesn't need DLC to survive. So stuff like that. Now, if it's true, and this is what I tweeted, I quote tweeted her, and I basically said, if it's true, the gaming industry needs to explode. It needs to, or I guess implode. It needs to implode on itself and like a phoenix, rise from the ashes. And this is where I want to get your take, Jay. I've been very consistent on this. I've actually always agreed with Sean Layden, right, former head of PlayStation Studios, when he had said, these games and their budgets, they're getting too big. We can't keep making games bigger and bigger and bigger. Open world take 4, 5, 6, 7 years to make them, because the industry cannot actually support that. And people kind of laughed at him when he first said that. That's aged perfectly. That's aged so well because, as you see, a game like a Cyberpunk takes 7-8 years, it comes out, it's still not even done, right? But that's just one example. So I really look at it the same way as I believe Sean Layden. I believe that that thought of mine where it's like if games are being made now, most, like she says, all or most big time games, if they're made with the mentality that they need DLC to break even, so they don't even expect to break even off of sales. If that's what every game's mindset is, we need to I truly believe that we need to restart the game industry, because that would be atrocious. So what do you think of that?
I guess my problem with it is that we're talking about capitalism too, and not to make this like political in any way, but would all these games really get made then? That's kind of my question. Isn't the point of it from the publisher side? Like, I'm talking the high ups, the suits who don't know about video game development, they know about money and investing and stuff like that. That's always been the point of their job: make money. If they can't make money off of it, it's not going to get made. Unless it's like an indie game or a smaller studio, stuff like that. And I'm very glad that those games get made still, by the way. Do not take that as like a dig, like we shouldn't make them. No, I love that. Some of my favorite games are those. Some of my least favorite games, at least right now, are some of those huge ones that everybody's playing. Things like the newest Call of Duty and stuff. It's like I've just kind of, even as someone who used to really enjoy those, and I hope to again in the future at some point when they're more complete experiences again, and not just nickeled and dimed if we ever hit that point again, which I don't think we will. I would like to enjoy those types of things, but the problem that I have is, yes, of course, if your budget is Destiny, you know what I mean? If it's like hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever, yes, you're going to need that stuff to break even, but you shouldn't need it to be that for every game. Like, a great example of this, you brought up The Quarry. What about Evil Dead the game? Yeah, obviously a lot of money went into that. Is it going to need, DLC and all kinds of this stuff to just break even? I don't know. I mean, if it does, that's bad, and it makes me wonder why more games aren't just abandoned immediately, kind of the way Anthem was.
Yeah, because of my biasness, the first one I thought of was Uncharted. Like, has any of the Uncharteds needed DLC to break even? Has God of War really you could think any Sony or Microsoft or Switch. Actually, she kind of is forgetting that Nintendo even exists, because Nintendo games, Mario Kart, without DLC, now it's getting DLC now, like 5-6 years after it came out, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. That game is like the best selling, besides like GTA. That game is the most sold game of the last like half decade. Does that need DLC to break even? No. You know what I mean? So I don't think she's making this with any. I do think she's overlooking a lot, but yet again, she's got like a 40 tweet thread that I'm absolutely not going to read all that. But I don't think she comes at it from a malicious way whatsoever. But I do think there's a lot of where it's like, yeah, even like Halo. Now, like Halo, yes, to survive long term, for people to play it long term, you need DLC. But to break even on the development costs, which it didn't, by the way, but I would assume based off of what happened. But to break even, I'd imagine, like you said, as the money maker people, you'd probably want that immediately. You're not, you know what I mean? You're not saying, well, if we can do it in the first year and a half, that'd be nice. No, we'd like to make it like day one. When GTA 5 sells and breaks records, or even COD breaks records the day it releases, they made all the money back right then and there. Everything else is just, a cherry on top. So, I don't know. Even like I think to Assassin's Creed, big open world, a lot of people play it for a long period of time. But even those games, I'd assume Ubisoft very much wants to break even on Odyssey, Valhalla, the day it releases. I assume that's their goal. You know what I mean? I just don't really buy that she's saying, what she's saying there.
Yeah, and I'm not throwing any of these people or anything under the bus, but when I was reading the bio, she worked before with Capcom, Xbox, Midway, EA. It's also possible that either the areas or games that she worked on were better about this too. I mean, like that's kind of one thing I want to say too. Like, when we talk about this, like you said, it's not like, hey, this person is a liar. That's not really the point. Like you said, it's, well, some people have more positive and negative experiences. So like, out of my friends who work in quality assurance, for example, I know one who has very bad experiences with like a very major company. And then I know another who has had very positive experiences with another major company. And then there's people within that same company who work under different branches who have different experiences as well. And developers and even game publishers and all these people, even the higher up executives, it depends who you're working with, who you're talking to, what the plan is. It also depends if things even go down the ladder. So, like, for example, there is a general ladder of you have the executives, then you have leads of development. I'm gonna like butcher this a little bit because there's more steps than this. I'm just making it short. You have essentially executives. Below them, there are like leads of development or like the game director. Then you have like the leaders in the development team, like kind of like sub managers. Then under them, you have just the developers. Then under them, you have the quality assurance type people kind of near the bottom. And it's not that none of them are important. It's just they're all at different rungs in the ladder, right? Well, just because somebody in mid development thinks, oh, we're doing the best we can, we're treating this with respect, and the company has told me that this is for the betterment of the game, doesn't mean that the guy at the top isn't like maniacally laughing that he's found a way to nickel and dime part of the experience. That's kind of the problem, is that there's so many degrees of separation that even within these companies, even ignoring NDAs and all this other stuff, you have a limited flow of information unless you are either an executive at the top or like the director of a game, like say you're the Hideo Kojima of that game. Well, yes, then you're going to have the entire picture. But I guess until, for me, someone like that comes out and really gives evidence of all of this, I'm just kind of skeptical of the experience, because you have a limited point of view and field of vision in wherever you are in that ladder of the games industry. And then we, people like us, have an even more limited version of it. And then I'm not saying people under us, but like the general consumer, right? I would say people like you and me who make content on stuff like this and talk about it and try and draw attention to things, we are more informed than maybe a lot of general consumers. There's going to be ones that are more informed than us too, that live and breathe it. But a lot of people just kind of go in, play the games, have an opinion on the game, and then they're gone. So you have all these different points of view and points of how informed you are on the thing and if that information is even accurate. So it kind of hits a point to me where it's like, we're just kind of left like, do we take the person's word for this or not? And that's almost the whole question.
Right. Yeah. And it like, well, that's why I believe a Sean Layden, I think so much. That's why I feel very passionate about, because I've always thought the stuff that Sean had said, games that have like a $200 million budget and games that continue to cost more and more, they're not sustainable. You're not going to be able to do that forever. You're not going to be able to keep it. The gaming industry is in a growth period, but eventually it's going to max out, or eventually the economy is going to hit the gaming industry. You're going to have to fire people. Developers are going to have to close. Like it's going to happen at some point, right? So, but the point is, you can't sustain it forever, and everybody's acting like you can. And that's, like a too big to fail kind of stuff. So that's why I respected, when he said that, where it's like, we need to get back to games basically that are 10 to 15 hour story games. Like we need more, and we have some here and there, but like in general, we need to kind of maybe as an industry move back to it, because not every game can be 50, 60, 70 hours. The budgets are getting too big. And that is, Halo Infinite was, I believe, $500 million. $500 million was the budget of that. GTA, I'm sure, is the same, if not more, right? So it's like, that's ridiculous. That's more than any Hollywood, and the gaming industry is bigger than Hollywood. That's a statistic. But that, so I guess it's to be assumed, but it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. So yeah, like we said, she's looking at it from her perspective. They only get told so much. It's almost like was it Shadow of Mordor or Shadow of War, right? Remember, like last second, the Tide, tuxedo executives decided to put in the microtransaction stuff into it. They didn't have a say. The developers literally did not have a say at Monolith. They were put in literally with like a couple weeks left. So it's like, these decisions can be made on the fly. They're not made by she's probably right. Developers, the people on the ground, they're making 60 to 100,000 a year. The people that, they work overtime, a lot of it, they are there to make the best game at launch humanly possible. They're not there to rip us off with DLC. I believe that. But it's not them that people talk about, or it shouldn't be them, right? when people complain about malicious DLC or a developer that maybe needs DLC to survive, and you can kind of point that out and say that's a flaw, we're not talking about the lighting artist. Like, that's not that's not who we're talking about, or at least it shouldn't be. And never have you and I think ever called out that wrong. Somebody who's got nothing to do with it. Some people do. Some people don't know who to place the blame on. But I think that's something important to kind of say as well. Any last thoughts, Jay?
Well, this is kind of my problem. It's the same problem I have with retail, and it's that the person behind the counter is not the person making the dumb decisions, the higher up management is, stuff like that. I think that, and this is not to encourage harassment of anybody, but if you want to call someone out and talk to someone, it's those managers that you should be talking to, like, or executives in the company that should be being contacted about stuff. Not that they care at all. It's not people like this on Twitter, some random game developer, no offense to her, who doesn't have a big say or pull over X, Y, and Z. I mean, we even look back at Konami. You have Hideo Kojima there, way back in the day, and he's making these decisions, but then above him, there's people pulling the strings on him, making him do certain stuff, pushing him around, right? And even though Hideo Kojima is like the face, he's like the face of Metal Gear, he was going to be the face of Silent Hills, he was going to be the face of all this stuff. You still have people in the background, in my opinion, kind of bullying him and making him do certain things. But then because he's the face you see, if there's a problem with the game, who do we blame? We blame Kojima. That's kind of the idea. And this power structure is set up in a way where you almost have these people below them who have to operate as fall guys. And it's really sad to me. It's kind of one reason why I genuinely believe that if you are a video game developer outside of maybe doing an interview, like how I know you've had people on your channel before for interviews with the things they are allowed to talk about and things like that, unless you're going to do something like that, I don't think you want social media, because you'll have all these people who get mad at something. They have nowhere to direct it. And so where do they direct it? They direct it at you. And I think that people like this person, I believe their name is Shauna, I think that's how you pronounce it. Someone like Shauna, just because she's a good person who wants to make the best possible game and she's in game development and doing something good, it doesn't mean it's Shauna's fault if the game is broken with bugs because the executives forced them to release it 4 months before it was ready or something. It's not her fault. But who do people go and blame and lash out at? They see her. They see, oh, Capcom employee, this game's from Capcom, I'm mad, that blah, 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 blah. And I think that that's a big problem with this whole structure, is that we get these limited points of view and fields of vision, and the people at the top have made themselves untouchable in almost every sector of industry, including gaming. And that's something that I think really should be seen as unacceptable, because they're the ones making the calls, and they're the ones who should have to answer for it if really anyone does at all.
I totally agree with that. It's set up to hide them. It's set up to put blame on others, and it's also set up that when you have a criticism, you're just labeled as toxic. What I mean? Like that's another discussion entirely, really. But it's actually all part of the same thing, because not only are they hidden, not only do people not even maliciously go after the wrong people, they do it unknowingly. But you also have the other a fragment of it where people could say, oh, you're harassing them, right? Kotaku would like to say, you're harassing the game developer. Only we can harass game developers, not you guys. And it's like, well, yeah, you're right. So that's another thing to come up with as well. It's tough. It's tough to get complaints through to the right people, and you just kind of have to cross your fingers and hope. But let us know what you guys think about this entire thing, DLCs, games going on too long, all that stuff, in the comments. Make sure you guys check out Jay's channels in the description. I'm going to have both his Let's Play and his main channel here for you guys to click on. It'll take you right to it, and you guys can subscribe there. Make sure you guys are subscribed here as well. And Jay, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. This is all, really interesting stuff. It just kind of makes me sad that it's even a question. I wish we lived in a world where, like, this was not even in question at all and we could just enjoy games. Not to toot our own horn, but this is why I think it is important for people to talk about stuff, because at the end of the day, you can't reach a lot of these people, and a lot of the people who try to are kind of vitriolic about it and go after the wrong people. And I think that only by kind of like encouraging public discussion where it actually starts to financially affect a game and kind of get the attention of these big companies, are any of these things able to change for the positive? So that's why I really enjoy kind of talking about stuff like this with you.
For sure. Yeah, it's important to talk, and I think, yeah, not to toot our own horn or to grow our egos, but I mean, I think we're pretty fair people, compared to sometimes what we see online. So thank you, Jay, for being here. Thank you guys all for watching at home, and we hope to see you all on the next video.